Hey guys, it's Austin here with Out Jeeping, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you guys how to diagnose and replace a bad tie rod end. Today we're going to be working on this 99 Cherokee right behind me, so let's get started. So one of the things you're going to notice when you have a bad tie rod end is that when you're driving down the road, you're going to have a loose steering. There's probably going to be a dead spot and a little bit more play in the steering. And that can even cause or increase death wobble on a solid axle vehicle like this Cherokee right here. But just wiggling this right here, you can hear it. There is a little bit of clicking going up in the front end, and that's probably from one of the bad tie rod ends. But to really know, we're going to jump underneath the Jeep and I'll show you guys how you can see and look for a bad tie rod end if you have one or possibly multiple. Alright, so looking underneath the Jeep here, obviously we have a front axle vehicle. So with this vehicle, it has a Y steering setup, and that basically means we have a drag link coming all the way down from the pitman arm, which is up here, and that goes directly to your steering box. And with the drag link, it actually bolts all the way over to your passenger side knuckle, and right in the middle here is where your tie rod end that goes to the driver's side. It connects right here, so that's why it's kind of a Y setup in the shape of a Y, and then your tie rod goes all the way down to the driver's side. So we got about 4 joints here to check over and make sure that there's no steering play in it. The best way to do it is just to look under here as someone shakes the steering wheel from inside. So I got someone right now, so you can go ahead. Alright, so now when this is moving, we're going to be looking for any play between the linkages. So we're going to put our finger right here. Now if you feel that either one of the ends are moving back and forth and they're not connected together, that's most likely a worn out joint. So I can see right where the tie rod bolts to the drag link. I actually do have a little bit of play right here, and that's what we're going to be replacing today. But you can go ahead and check over your other joints, make sure that there's no slop. I already done that and they actually look pretty decent. So some preventative maintenance that you can do to prevent this from happening is obviously they all have grease zerks on majority of vehicles. You want to make sure you grease them up, you know, once a year is usually good. Sometimes at the rubber boot it actually cracks and dirt and water gets in there, and that actually accelerates wearing out your joints. So you want to make sure that those are all in good condition. If it's in bad condition, it's always good to replace it beforehand before it gets too bad. So today we're just going to be replacing this one right here that goes to our tie rod that's bolted to our drag link. Alright, so before I take off that bad tie rod end, I'm actually going to take a measurement what our toe is up here, because once we remove that and put the new one in, our alignment's going to be slightly off. But by just taking a measurement and putting the new one in and getting it back to where it kind of was, it still gets you by for a while, but eventually you're going to want to take it to a professional and get it professionally aligned, so that way everything is spot on, and that way you don't ruin your tires. So I'm just going to put a tape measure on a tread that I'm going to keep track of, and just make sure to measure from the same exact spot when we have the new one on. So right here I'm getting about 52 and 13/16. So when I put the new tie rod end on, that's where I'm going to put the measurement at. So the next step to take this off is we have to remove this cotter pin. This one's kind of rusted out, and because most of my tools are at my other garage, I'm just going to have to use this to try and get this cotter pin out. Ideally you want to use some side cut wire cutters. Those work the best. That way you can just kind of pry it out on one side. But we're going to try this and see what it does. Alright, so that didn't really want to come out nicely. I ended up just having to cut them off on the nubs here, but sometimes when you back off the nut, it'll actually just break the rest, and sometimes it might come out. So this is actually going to be a 3/4 inch, and I got my impact over here. We're going to try and take this off. There we go. So that actually came off nicely, and it just broke the nubs on there. If this ends up spinning, you're actually going to end up having to cut off the tie rod end, and that's, you know, more of a pain in the butt. You can either do that with a Sawzall or a cutoff wheel. Alright, so one last thing we have to do before we take this all the way off is we have to break this free over here. It's basically just a clamp that goes around your tie rod end, and basically when you tighten it up, it kind of squeezes on the tie rod end, so that way your alignment stays straight and you won't have to worry about that moving around. So right here it's just a simple 5/16 bolt, and we're going to do that real quick. Alright, so my camera wasn't on for some reason, but this ended up actually snapping off because it's so rusted. but it's not a big deal because it's just a simple 5/16 bolt that's like 1.25 inches long, so you can go to the hardware store and easily replace that. And it wouldn't be a bad idea to spray some PB Blaster on some of these threads for the old tie rod end, because we're going to have to unthread this from our tie rod. Alright, so to separate the tie rod end from the drag link here, since we're not reusing this old one obviously, you can try and hammer on the end right here. Otherwise you can actually use a pickle fork and get it in between right here. This ends up actually ruining the boot, so it's not a really good idea if you want to reuse a tie rod end. Sometimes some pitman arm pullers can work better if you want to save the tie rod end. But I'm just going to try and smack in this real quick. If that doesn't work, I'll use a pickle fork. There we go. Alright, so I was able to swing the tie rod end off up front here so we have more room, and it's still connected over there on the driver's side. And to help you get this free from here, since this one is actually all rusted in, I sprayed some more PB Blaster in there, and I got a pipe wrench, and basically I have enough leverage so I can basically stand on this and it should break this free. Broke free a little bit. You can also heat up the tie rod end. That way it expands more and lets go of the tie rod end more, but I'm going to try this for a little bit. If not, I'll heat it up. I should also note that on certain tie rod ends, some of them are normal thread and some of them have reverse thread. This one actually does have normal thread on it, so we're just going to loosen it up how we normally would on a regular bolt. And once I broke this free, I kind of wiggled it back and forth. Put some more PB Blaster in there, and it's coming out nicely now. Alright, so we'll take a look at our tie rod end now, and as you can see, there's a lot of slop in there, so this is primarily our issue. It shouldn't be this loose at all, so it should be nice and tight. Even though this was greased up enough, it just probably was a cheap joint that wore out fast. Alright, so I got the new and old tie rod ends side by side next to each other, and as you can see, they do have a Zerk fitting that's going to be on the bottom end right here. So our new tie rod end does come with a new grease Zerk right here, and it's going to be an 8mm. So we're just going to install that right quick before we install the tie rod end into the Jeep. You don't want to go too tight because you don't want to strip these guys out. So before I reinstall this, I did make a little reference mark on the threads. Basically just measuring from the center here to out here with both of them next to each other, and you can kind of see where the thread engagement was on the old tie rod end with where the heavy rust was on the outside, just to give it in the ballpark so that way we're not super far off. So next thing I'm going to do is put some anti-seize on these threads right here and then reinstall it in the tie rod. Alright, so I got the new tie rod end right to where I put the mark on, and now I'm actually going to bolt this back up to the drag link right here. And since I did keep the tires on the ground right away, nothing should have really moved up here in the front steering. So if I got it right, which it looks like I got it pretty darn close because it went and popped right in. So that way nothing really moved too much. But I am going to bolt this on, and then we're going to recheck the alignment. I'm going to show you how to do that by just spinning the tie rod. But first, let's get a nut back on here. They do come with a brand new castle nut, and it's going to be another 3/4. Alright, so we're going to get this pretty snug, and then we're going to want to make sure to line up the holes to one of the slots here in the castle nut, so that way we can put our cotter pin into place. Alright, so I got this all lined up, but quality control at AC Delco kind of sucks for this because the cotter pin hole is too shallow. It's actually should be out more on the threads, even though this is all the way tight, to be able to put the cotter pin all the way through, but it's just not big enough, and even when hammering it, it won't go all the way through. So I'm just going to have to stick one end in here and then just wrap this around so that way it shouldn't back out. Alright, so with that all in place, I'm actually going to go and hit this grease Zerk before I forget and fill it full of grease. Alright, so last thing we got to do to make the alignment as best as we can before we get it into a shop that does professional alignments is, if our measurement is off when we put that tie rod back in, what we can do is actually loosen the jam nut just like this on the other side, and then we should be able to actually rotate this entire tie rod tube. And if you can go one way, it's going to tow out the vehicle, and if you go the other way, it's going to tow in. So I actually did take my measurement real quick, and I'm actually pretty much spot on to where I was before I started, so I'm not going to worry about doing this. It's fine for me until I get it into a shop for alignment. Plus the other side is pretty rusty, and I might actually break that other bolt for that locking ring just trying to get that off. So I'm not going to touch that for now, but to finish this up, I got a new 5/16 bolt, and I'm just going to stick it right in here, and then we can tighten that up and we should be pretty much done. Alright, so with that tightened up, we're pretty much done. Alright guys, that's going to be a wrap for today's video. As you saw, it's nothing too difficult to do on changing a tie rod end. I would recommend, if you do get like new tires on your vehicle, just look over all the tie rod ends and replace them right away before you get new tires. That way you don't have any premature wear on the tires. And it's also more convenient just to get alignment done as you're getting your new tires put on as well. So if you found this video helpful, make sure to like and subscribe to the Out Jeeping YouTube channel to help keep these videos coming. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer, so make sure to comment below. Until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video.